Merry Christmas. And for all of you who are seeing this through the internet, we're really hoping that you have a wonderful Christmas in your house and with your family. This morning's devotional comes to us from the chapter 12 of Mark, verses 38 through 44. And in his teaching, he, Jesus, was saying, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and like personal greetings in the marketplaces, and seats of honor in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets, who devour widows' houses, and for appearance's sake offer long prayers. These will receive all the more condemnation." And Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and began watching how the people were putting money into the treasury, and many rich people were putting in large amounts. A poor widow came, and she put in 2 lepta, which amount to a quadrans. Calling his disciples to him, he said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributors in the treasury. For they all put out of their own surplus, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she owned, all she had to live on." Now, if you don't know what a lepta is, I didn't know either, but I looked it up. And in Jesus' time, a lepta was a Greek coin, which would be the equivalent to 1 cent today. Not with inflation or anything, but just it was a 1/100th of their currency. Like 1 cent is 1/100th of our currency today as a dollar. I often hear people say, "I just don't have that much money, and what little bit I could give to the church or to the government, to a nonprofit, to any organization that's doing God's work, well, it wouldn't be enough to make a difference." Maybe, in some people's minds, that might be true. But it also seems to be a very convenient thing then for us to then say and have an excuse to not put in our money, to not think about how much we could be helping someone else, and perhaps just to save that money for ourselves. About a month ago, I was with a dear friend, and we started talking about Christmas that was coming up, and he said, "Have I ever told you the Effie story?" And I said, "The Effie story?" "Yes, this woman I knew," he said, and he was anxious to tell me it. It turns out that it's his Christmas story that he remembers all of the time. His being Dennis Sexton, a friend, mentor, father figure for me for many years now. Dennis shared this story, and then when I asked if I could share it with you this morning, he said, "Well, it's already been in the newspaper. It was in the Tampa Bay Times," I think just called the Times at that time, in 2005. But I wanted to show and tell that story one more time, because it goes right along with what Mark and Jesus are telling us through the Gospels. Dennis said, "It was the last few days before Christmas some 30 years ago. All Children's Hospital in St. Petersburg was busy with families and their sick children entrusted to our care. Our staff was busy receiving toys and gifts from people coming to the hospital to make sure that each child would be remembered that Christmas day. One morning that week, a particularly warm and humid day, Robin Johnson from our development office tapped on my door. With tears in her blue eyes, Robin asked if I could meet a donor. When I stepped into the reception area, there was an elderly African-American woman of short, stout stature whose arthritic body caused her to have a stooped appearance. Her skin was the color of faded ebony, and her calloused knees and hands were much lighter, as if bleached from years of scrubbing floors or toilets. She was dressed in a worn white dress with her hair matted from perspiration, and she made her shoes fit by walking on the heels. Her eyes twinkled above a broad and gentle smile. "This is Effie," Robin said in an introduction. "She's brought us to her contribution for the children." I asked her last name. "Just call me Effie," she responded. "My gift's not much," she continued, "but I wanted to bring it all to all children's because I know the work you do. I live in the projects north of the police station, and I see many poor children who get very sick and go to the hospital, and you care for them. I know their mamas mostly can't pay. The hospital still cares for them, and I know it costs lots of money. This year, I decided to give some of my money to all children's, Effie continued. I always give 10% first to my church. Then I make sure all my nieces and nephews have birthday and Christmas gifts. After that, my sorority has a Christmas fund I give to so poor children in the projects get presents. And this money I set aside over the year for all children's. Now, Dennis Sexton wouldn't tell you this, but he was the president and CEO at the time of All Children's. Robin held out an envelope that was limp with moisture. It had been placed in Effie's pocket during her journey to All Children's on that warm day. Robin brought out 8 separate dollar bills that had been stuffed into an envelope at different times over the past year. She sat them on the desk to dry. Effie was pleased. I asked Effie if she would like to tour the hospital. At first she said no. She felt we were too busy. When I countered it with an offer to the neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU, Effie was more than willing to see the tiny premature babies. The caring nurses at the preemie unit greeted Effie with enthusiasm. They gave her a protective gown. She put it on and they took her to beside the babies. When we returned to the office, we asked how Effie was going to get back home. She said she would walk and declined Robin's offer to take her home or to the nearest bus stop. No, said Effie. The bus ride here and back would take most of what I had to give. It would cost you money to drive me as well. No, I want the children to have all my gift, small as it is. I walked Effie to the front door of the All Children's and watched her as she made her way in her broken shoes down the block. Effie repeated this trek for the next 4 years. Each time she walked to the hospital and presented the envelope, and our development staff unfolded each dollar bill as it had been stuffed away for All Children's over the past year. Effie never revealed her name or address. She didn't want to be on a mailing list. We always offered her a ride. She always said no in a gentle way. We asked if we could identify her and tell her story so people would know of her kindness. She always declined. After 4 years, Effie no longer appeared. In later years, we found an obscure obituary noting the passing of a woman named Effie. The photo showed a younger woman in a pillbox hat with numerous medallions. The text indicated she was an avid church member, belonged to a local women's sorority, and was survived by numerous nieces and nephews. This Effie, perhaps our Effie, had died in a local nursing home where she had lived the past several years. This Christmas marks the 3rd since I retired from All Children's, wrote Dennis. I think often of warm and generous donors whose gifts helped the hospital grow in stature and service. But the donor I always remember during Christmas week is the lady whose modest but joyous gifts were a major inspiration and lasting lesson in sacrificial giving. The one who just said, "Just call me Effie." Friends, whether it's at Christmas time and you're celebrating the birth of Christ Jesus, or it's any other day in a year, this is a story to remember, along with the words of Mark in our gospel. Effie's story is not about money so much. It doesn't matter the amount of money. It matters that the giving was done. We see that Jesus was watching those in the temple giving and noticed the widow. God is watching us and notice what we do with what he provides us in our lives too. But the thing that goes on is the story. The story of the widow's mite, the story of this one coin worth a cent in Jesus' time, the story of $8 or $5 or $10, whatever Effie had that year that she provided for All Children's Hospital, that story goes on. That story warms our hearts and allows us to know this is how God's grace should be too. I pray that each one of us will take Effie's story on to others, that we will live it out this Christmas, and that we will remember it just as much as my friend Dennis remembers it each and every Christmas in his life. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do for God and for Christ Church. May you have a Merry Christmas.